is TurnOneThoughtseize. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Chris.
This is episode 38, The Sideboard.
Are we adding effects in post now?
No, I'm adding effects in the can. Baby, we don't have to do anything.
Did that live.
Yeah, that's right.
Old radio talent.
Yeah, accent on the old. Not so much on the talent. I'm rusty. Which is weird because we record this thing every other week for like a year and change.
Yep.
I feel like I should be less rusty than I am, but just, you know how it is. Getting old. Parts are getting old. So we get asked constantly about sideboarding, as does everybody who's in any kind of sort of forward-facing position in Magic.
Yeah.
Sideboarding is really, 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 really important because just on math, 2/3 of your games are going to be post-board.
Yep.
So they're really the matches that you need to plan for. A lot of people make the mistake of just playing pre-board games to be like, oh man, this is pretty good, or like, oh, I just can't win.
Yep.
I just auto fold to whatever, taking turns. Just kidding. Nobody auto folds to that deck. So you can really, really get a much better feel for what your deck really does the statistical majority of the time by playing post-board games. Yep. And it really, really makes a huge difference. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the decks we're working on, some GP results, and playmat update, or non-update. It's a pseudo-update.
It's almost like an update. Basically, orders in, and all processed and stuff, and we just are waiting for them to get shipped to us so we can ship them to you.
Yeah, I would imagine they probably would be here
sometime early next week, which still works, no matter whether we're recording this now or you're listening later.
Yep. Blammo.
So, yeah, basically on schedule.
Yep. We ordered them on time. As far as we know, they're making them on time.
Yeah, the only thing we didn't anticipate was the Memorial Day sale. I didn't anticipate that. I forgot that they did that.
Yeah, it's kind of a kick in the pants.
But
well, I don't know if it would have applied to the bulk. You know what?
It's just a bunch of influx of orders that they're processing all at once. They physically need to print so many in such a... Like, this is a big sales bump for them, so we'll see.
Got it. All right. The GPs. Charlotte happened.
Even just the sentence Charlotte happened is quite in...
Well, yeah, Charlotte happened with, as far as I know, a minimum of sort of hullabaloo. Wizards did what they could with what they had.
Just not very much.
And, yeah, I mean, they could have done nothing.
The real stars... Wow, that was... The pun entered my mind halfway through. I was saying stars are Star City Games. Like, the way that they handled the situation was actually phenomenal. They did a great job adding extra events and allowing people to drop and still get value because everything was all messed up. So...
Oh, that's right!
Yeah, all of the Swiss pairings were random for day one.
Yes.
And then tiebreakers were supposed to be wiped out because they shouldn't really apply because it wasn't Swiss. It was random. Right. So, but the new software doesn't let you do that. So, basically, the Wizards came out with more Wizard software and it didn't work right, and we're hoping. We're hoping for something else.
In the industry, we call that a stress test.
It's no. No, you stress test something before you launch it. You should have some sort of beta where you just enter in fake data for a tournament.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Like...
you just roll it out, and then you fix it afterwards. Haven't you ever made an app before?
I mean, yes, but not like this.
Yeah, you just roll it, baby.
Man, that sounds awful.
Well, that's why I don't do software development anymore. I'm like, yeah, roll it out. Who cares? Whatever. What's the worst that's going to happen?
At least
2,200 people are going to complain. It's not my problem.
So it's okay. You just have to like slam the title beta on it, and then no one can complain, and everything's fine.
You bury it in the user agreement.
Can't complain. Must pay money.
Yep. So GP Charlotte, when the dust finally settled, ad nauseum, a good ad nauseum player, which is a rarity in the wild, beat Zoo. Actually, we don't have the pairings, but
well, no, they did beat Zoo because
they did. Yes, they definitely beat Zoo. Ad nauseum versus Zoo, and it was Big Zoo with Tireless Tracker.
Man,
that card's real good.
I mean,
in Big
is,
Zoo,
but it's just like, man, I just can't believe people are playing it.
I can. Card's dope.
It's fine.
No, it's they didn't lose anything.
Right, yeah.
You know, they're still running 5 Mana Dorks, 4 Wild Nicottles, 2 Kasali Pride Mage in the main, 3 they cut 1 Scavenging Ooze, which is very fine. 4 Tarmogoyfs, 4 Knight of the Reliquary, 4 Smiters, 1 Tireless Tracker like a boss. They're running the Domri raid that I had really good results with.
Oh yeah, Domri raid's great, especially in Big Zoo.
And they're running Collected Company because it's not Big Mana Zoo, it's just Big Body Zoo.
Yeah.
So, yep, Bonfire of the Damned in the side. The Mirror Breaker. Valor Stance. Throw on the last roll. Man, he's been making a huge comeback. And I don't know if it's in response to anything specific.
Well, Thrun is really good when you're... first of all, when you can cast it reliably, and you can cast it quickly, and more importantly, when your opponents are casting lots of removal spells.
Sure.
And not sweepers. And so, I'm not sure. It's definitely, like, you want it against Jund and Grixis. Like, they don't really have any valid answers. A lot of decks just struggle with the threat of Thrun.
Yep.
It's a big body. It's real good.
Yep. So, that was that. I don't think... I'm not familiar enough with the normal quote-unquote ad nauseum to know if there was anything in here that was atypical.
Really the only things that you... And I'm not an ad nauseum expert, but I've looked through... Okay, so the main deck, Lab Maniac, is actually, in my mind, a debate. And some people are going to argue that, and that's fine. Some people run a main deck Lab Maniac and the main deck Lab Maniac combo.
Yep.
Other people run a second copy of Lightning Storm. Or instead of the Lab Maniac, you run 1 Lightning Storm and 1 Conflagrate.
Oh, right. Yep.
And so those are your 3 options. You should run 2 of them main deck, at least one of which is Lightning Storm, the second of which could be a second Lightning Storm. I've seen that done, and then you keep the Lab Maniac in the side. I kind of like the Lab Maniac main deck because it gives you... Now you don't lose to Infinite Life combo game 1 either.
Right.
Like, if your CoCo opponent manages to gain Infinite Life and passes a turn to you game 1, you can still, like, if you're at that magic 6 mana, you can still combo off and Lab Maniac to win that turn. So.
Yep. So there you go. Jund. Junded somebody.
Mike Sigrist
junded a lot of people.
Yep. Also with some Thruns worth mentioning.
Yeah, 2 Thruns on the side.
And Grim Lavamancer, which is slowly becoming much better and better in the format right now.
Yeah.
So definitely, even some Naya Zoo lists. Not Naya Zoo, Naya Burn.
Yep.
Cutting Wild Nicottles in favor for Grim Lavamancer and more burn spells. That seems very good. In Jund, obviously, seems very good. And even some Grixis lists can run it as a one-of.
Yep.
It just mows down a lot of creatures.
Yep. Seal of Fire for Tarmogoyf.
And honestly, one thing I've noticed recently, Seal of Fire, which we've talked about before in one of our Spice Rack segments, real good against Eidolon of the Great Revel.
Yep.
Like, if you know you're going up against Burn game 2 or something, you just slam it out there. It will kill almost any of their creatures.
Right.
And do so whenever you want without triggering Eidolon. So that's really cool.
There was a Bant Knight Company that came in top 8.
Yeah, so we're using MTG Goldfish, and occasionally they'll have some naming problems. The Bant Knight Company is Knight Coral Helm combo.
Right. Yeah, Knight of the Reliquary, collected, or Retreat to Coral Helm, just basically get a land, untap, do it again.
Yep.
Bam, 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 get a giant.
Float a bunch of mana, pump it into Keswick Wolf Run, win the game.
Yep. Or, oh no, they don't run it. There's the more all-in version of the Knight to Coral Helm combo runs I believe it's a one-of Sajiri step to give it as the last land that you draw.
Right.
Because it'll give it protection from whatever. Yep. And then you can smash in, and you don't have to sort of do the bookkeeping with all the Keswick Wolf Run stuff.
Right.
It also ran a Westvale Abbey,
which is cool.
You know, it seems fine. You know, if you get towards the mid to late game, you got a bunch of mana dorks that aren't doing anything for you anymore. Tutor it up with
even just Kitchen Finks and Voice Resurgence, honestly, because like you're still getting a creature after the fact, so it doesn't feel as bad. But or if you're in a board stall.
Yep. Surgical Extraction, Twisted Image. Does deck care about Spellskite? Oh, Retreat. You redirect the retreat trigger?
Yes, you may.
Blammo. So I guess you really, really need to kill Spellskites.
Sure.
I guess you could use it on Tarmogoyf too.
Moderate value.
Okay, well, it's not value. Courser.
Anyway, so rounding out the top 8 was another Jund list. Once again, it wasn't anything.
Nothing to see here.
Super remarkable. It did run Huntmaster of the Fells over Kalidas, which is probably the thing worth mentioning, and a Ghost Quarter main deck, which is also one debatable thing. Really, with Jund, it's build the version that you enjoy playing and play it a lot. We also had Scapeshift. This one I wanted to mention because it ran 2 kind of neat cards. Hunting Wilds, which we had mentioned before, as a one-of. It does have a kicker for 3 and a green, and its normal cost is 3 and a green. You search a library for up to 2 forest cards and put them into play tapped, then shuffle your library. And if you do pay the kicker, then you can untap all forests put into play that way, and they become 3/3 green creatures, which are still lands. The important thing with this card is the forests stay creatures.
Right.
So you can do it one turn and then just have them there, and your opponent's like, alright, sure. And then they're still there and they're going to be blockers. And a lot of people forget, like, because most text is the land doesn't stay a creature, especially from a card this old.
Yep.
So, good old time Spiral Block. The other card that it's running, which was interesting to me, Worldly Council. So, 1 in a blue with Domain. Look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. Put one of those cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So, in this deck, which is, I should mention, 5 colors since it's running the Bring to Light, you get to, I believe it's 5 colors. Blue, white, red, white. Nope, just 4. It is not running the black for the 5th color, but it's not really fetching any of that anyway. So,
it's just
2
getting
mana,
Scapeshift.
Right. Bring to Light's mostly getting Scapeshift and then sideboard cards. But you only need to hit 4, so this can be 2 mana, look at the top 4, and it's just better than Anticipate at that point. And Anticipate's already very close to being modern playable as it is.
Yeah.
So, in this exact deck, It seems interesting. I mean, he top 8'd GP with it, so congrats to him. Be interesting to see what he has to say about it.
Yeah, it's as a 2 of, I don't know if it ever really came up.
Yeah, I'm sure it helped when it was relevant and fine when it wasn't.
Yep, and then Sam Black, number 8 with a bullet. Suicide. I love this deck. I think this is probably what I'll play after Eldrazi Taxes.
Yeah?
I have all the cards.
Oh, that's right. I forgot you have baubles.
Yeah, I got baubles like a million years ago. They haven't gone up too much, but they have gone up to the point where I wouldn't be happy if I had to buy them now.
Right.
When I had the opportunity to buy them much cheaper. You know, like...
Should have just been Psychic and put Bauble in Eternal Masters.
I don't know if the power level is there.
It's not a rare. It's like a common or uncommon.
I don't know. There wasn't... Like, there's not a lot of chaff slots that I think people would really...
There are definitely some rares that you could replace Bauble with, and people would be happy.
Yeah,
like some of those, like the hybrid mana ones that they put in there. Yeah, because there's also there's a few of them, but oh well, it's also a draft format. But yeah, I mean this deck is sweet. Normally I wouldn't. We're going to be talking about it a lot today. It sure is a lot of one-ofs for an aggro deck, but
yeah, I guess the thing about the sideboard for this deck is, first of all, you do draw a lot of cards.
You do, yep.
You know, between 4 Street Wraiths, 4 Baubles, 4 Probes, you really do have a fair amount of card draw. The other thing is, a lot of the time, it's not really going to matter. You know, I mean, you're so fast. Like, the cards that you draw, if you do draw a sideboard card, you're going to be like, oh, great. This will make my next turn pretty easy. Because if I don't win next turn, I'm going to lose.
Right.
I don't think that's inherently bad. The only thing, like, you can switch up the creature base by adding a Tarmogoyf and 3 Hooting Mandrills. You can add more discard, and then Natural State, Ancient Grudge, Stony Silence, you know, all sort of work in the same sphere. Like if you've got combo decks, artifact-based decks, and then Pyroclasm.
Pyroclasm and Phyrexian Unlife are both good against the Little Zoo and Burn decks.
Yep. Yeah, and Phyrexian Unlife's interaction with Death Shadow is hilarious and amazing.
Yep.
So the official ruling for Phyrexian Unlife as it relates to Death Shadow is, if your life is negative, Death Shadow gets +X, where X is the negative life total that you have.
It's just straight subtraction.
Yeah.
So if you have a negative number and you're subtracting it, it's going to get bigger.
All right, math man.
It's not... That's like... what? 3rd grade? 4th grade?
I don't know. They do... At my daughter's school, they do fractions in kindergarten.
Okay. That's good. I was being more on that pessimistic side. I have no idea.
Yep. Well, they do...
when math happens.
Pre-kindergarten, they do a binomial cube. But they also do a lot of, like, stick counting and bean counting and stuff. Like literal bean counting, not, like, accounting.
No, I got
Put them to work.
For a bean company, no less.
All right, kid, you're 4 years old. It's time to start working on your CPA. So, once again, that deck is pretty good. If you like linear aggro decks, man, that do have, like, some actual decisions.
Well,
it's not just like...
but, like...
It's not just like, play 1-drop, play 2 1-drops, play 3 1-drops, you know.
Because this one's not as simple because you can't... Like, Death Shadow's a 1-drop you can't necessarily play on turn 1, so... It's tough.
Yeah.
Jumping over to the West Coast.
Yep.
We had GPLA.
GPLA. Sounds Klingon.
says a little bit.
Gapla!
Which
Merfolk.
is won by Merfolk, which apparently there was a ton of day 2.
There must have been like a Merfolk subreddit uprising where they were like, we're taking it down, and like 60 people showed up all with Merfolk because in the top cards played, Aether Vial, Cursecatcher, and Silvergill Adept were all in the top 10 most played cards in the entire tournament. And the top 10 creatures were Spellskite, Cursecatcher, Silvergill Adept, Lord of Atlantis, Master of the Pearl Trident. So there was a lot of Merfolk. So if you were the guy who was spying on the Merfolk subreddit when they decided to just try and take over the world, and you were like, I'm bringing all the boils, baby, then you probably did okay. Or if you were that 13-year-old kid that brought Affinity.
Yeah.
And I gotta tell you, I watched that match, and the kid's pretty good. Definitely.
Congrats to him.
Yes. Pascal Maynard came in third with BW Eldrazi.
Yeah, I was gonna touch on this just because it's just so weird to see it, honestly. But it's cool.
I don't hate it. I have seriously considered Drowner of Hope as like a splash.
Yeah, it's
because I have Cavern of Souls.
Sure, but I mean at the same time it's like it's cool and you can get a lot of value out of it, but I don't know that it's better than a mid-range disruptive deck. Like, it's much more beatdown. Obviously, this performance was good, but this is where it's a tough judgment call as to whether or not is this the real deal or is this Pascal Maynard, who has traditionally done well at GPs.
Yeah, I mean, Ancient Stirrings is such a huge pickup for that deck.
It is.
And it also gets to run Stubborn Denial out of the side.
Yeah, but then...
Stubborn Denial is amazing in this deck. And then World Breaker, and the card is just unreal good.
World Breaker's very, very good. The only thing that I've...
And he was running 4 Cavern of Souls, speaking of.
Which is good, because most of his cards were Eldrazi. It was Eldrazi and Mana Dorks and Spellskite.
Yep.
But besides that, Ancient Stirring is probably like the biggest pickup along with Worldbreaker, which is why I've also seen people messing around with the idea of an Abzan Eldrazi list. Which is also, to me, probably seems like the better version of the two. Like, if you just mash them together, you drop some of the Thalia stuff and the Aether Vials, and you instead have a much more mid-rangey card advantage version with the Ancient Stirrings and World Breakers, so maybe that's like the answer.
Birthing Hulk.
Well,
it's not bad. I mean, it's not as good as World Breaker, but it's another big giant green Eldrazi that actually does stuff.
Right.
Then 4th place, Jund, doing that thing. Outpost Siege instead of Chandra in the sideboard.
Yeah.
It's fine.
I'm not thrilled. I like Chandra because I think she's more versatile. But most of the time, like, you do just kind of end up using Chandra as an Outpost Siege anyway.
Right.
But I'd rather have the option to do something else. And the other version of Outpost Siege, where it's like, whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, it deals the damage to a creature or player. I don't think that's nearly as relevant as Chandra. Just being able to just ping one.
Yeah. Abzan Company. Deck's real good.
Yeah.
Did I skip one? No, I didn't.
Talk about it more later.
Yeah.
This version was running the Farika in the board, which I'm not a fan of.
I was gonna ask about that. I don't love that.
No, it's for very slow, grindy matchups, but I prefer Scavenging Ooze in that instance because the mana investment into Farika is huge, and it costs a black mana.
Yeah.
And now you have to fight through a bunch of 1/1 Black Death touching snakes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, hey, we'd have to see if he even used it. It could have just been in there.
Right. Well, it was kind of popularized by Logan Mize. He did his How to Play Abzan Company primer a couple weeks ago on Star City Games, and he was really trying to sell Freaka a lot. I mean, it is also like a 5/5 indestructible creature that you will be able to turn on, because I mean, even like Kitchen Finks has 2 devotion in it,
right?
So you're more than half of the way there, and if you have 1 or 2 birds or something, like now so you're at 6.
So it needs 7.
In
so
itself
2,
is 2, so you need 5
4.
additional. But so many of your cards are like, look at if you have a Eternal Witness, Kitchen Finks, and a Mana Dork, it's turned on.
Sure.
So it doesn't take a lot. It takes a bit, but not a lot. It's also worth mentioning this list was running 3 Viscera Steer, some run 3, some run 4.
Sure.
Yeah. Also in top 8, we had Affinity, which mean still a good deck. It hasn't been on the radar as much. It doesn't help that a lot of people have been packing a ton of hate too.
Mm-hmm.
Only 2 Etch Champions, which I think is getting a lot more popular, favoring Steel Overseer.
Yeah.
And then 1 Master of Ethereum.
Yep. Why not?
Yeah. Seems good.
Everything else, yeah. Nothing really to see there. Oh, it runs 2 the Etch Champions in the sideboard. So
yeah,
you can go up to 4.
It's good. It's not great in all matchups, I guess. And some matchups, I guess, probably just don't care about it. And now that if Eldrazi is actually being popular, it's just not very good.
Right.
So having 2 in the main, 2 in the side makes sense.
Grixis Control.
Oh man, this list.
Man. You know what? We'll talk about it later.
All right, we'll talk about it last.
It's like
we still need to talk about Red Green Tron, which I'm sure we're both thrilled about. Joe Lissette.
Yep.
I guess, I mean, he's known for miracles. Now he's known for Tron.
Yep.
It's the same list for the most part.
Sunshock out of the side, Thragtusk. I mean,
yeah, I think most of the changes were just in the sideboard. The main deck looks the same. The 2 Sanctum of Ugin has been a big thing for him. And then the creature distribution has been basically all 2-ofs for him. 2 Spellskite, 2 Wormcoil, 2 Worldbreaker, 2 Ulamog, and I think he's been on that for a while.
Yeah, but with Ancient Stirrings
and 4 Karn,
it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
He could probably run 4 creatures.
Well,
and it wouldn't.
I guess
it wouldn't significantly. I mean, I guess on straight math it would. The number of times that you would have them in your opening hand, but the number of times that you would be able to find them with Ancient Stirrings is still enough that I bet you would get there most of the time.
Yeah, because I'm looking at it again and just kind of looking at it a little differently. He's running 8 creatures, but he's running like 14 threats because he also has 2 Ugins and 4 Karns.
Mm-hmm.
So he has 14 threats. As soon as he gets Tron, he's going to have one of those threats.
Something, yeah.
So it might not be the ideal, but that's what the other Ancient Stirrings are for.
Yeah.
So that seems good to me.
Yep. All right, so let's go. We're going to go backwards to Grixis Control, and I will let you talk about this.
So
work of art.
Yeah.
Not even a sarcastic work of art. It's actually it's actually really good.
It's great because, I mean, you start with, so you have your 4 Ancestral Vision, but you also have your 4 Serum Visions. So we're already off to that start.
Yep. A lot of turn 1 plays.
And 4 Cryptic Command, which is
very aggressive.
Yep. If we want to draw more cards, we also have 4 Thought Scours.
Sure.
Yep, why not? And then it's just kind of removal spells and counter spells.
Well, what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to have to snap one of your cryptic commands.
Right, yeah. So, 2 Spell Snare, 1 Dreadbore, which we've obviously been advocating for a long time. 1 main deck Negate.
Yeah.
There's a lot of powerful planeswalkers.
Get them.
That Nahiri could be an Emrakul. You can't negate an Emrakul for 2 reasons.
That is correct.
1 Remand, 3 Terminate, 3 Kolaghan's Command, which also seems aggressive, especially when you're only running 7 creatures. 4 Snapcaster Mages, 3 Tassigers. End of list.
Yeah, well, you mill your Snapcaster Mage by accident, Kolaghan's command to bring it back, and then snap the Kolaghan's command
To return your Tassiger, which you then delve.
Problems. Like, this deck
and you're doing all of this.
It's 100% solutions.
22 lands.
Yeah,
seems good. No, in all seriousness, this seems kind of cool. Like I enjoy this a bit. I like when people just kind of go, because when you think about the last kind of Grixis decks that did well, it was the more control-y Delver versions. I was basically just using Delver of Secrets as a clock and a lot of Delve creatures. And this is just that in the complete opposite direction. And I mean, Cryptic Command does solve most of the format if you can live long enough. So that's kind of it. And when you're running like the 4 bolts, the Dreadbore, the Terminates, the Kolaghan's Command, you'll probably live long enough.
Yeah, you can kill all the things.
Yep. And that's pretty much it for the 2 top 8s.
And you know what? If you really need to grind somebody out, 2 Creeping Tar Pits.
Oh no, and that's huge too.
3 power unblockable.
Creeping Tar Pit is not the best man land by any means, but it is fairly good. As for the sideboard, there wasn't too much of anything worth noting except for 1 Sun Droplet, which was kind of interesting. I'm not thrilled, but it seems fine. Good for grinding out some value. And then 1 card that we might be talking about later.
Yep. Spoiler alert. Don't worry about it. We'll come back to it.
In the spice rack.
Doodly doodly doo.
So yeah, those are the 2 top 8s. Even beyond the top 8s, format looks healthy.
Yeah.
There is a new deck that I think we should probably touch on besides the rest.
Is it the sweet BG Rock deck with Hangerback Walker in the side?
No, it's just Nahiri. We should probably talk about Nahiri.
No, dude, I love this deck, though.
No, I get it. And I probably do too once I look at it, but
4 Hangerback Walker, 4 Disfigure, 3 Fulminator Mage. It's just, it's the Rock. And as we know, you can't stop the Rock.
Besides that, so going to more control decks that run very few creatures, Jeskai Nahiri, lightly talked about it before, probably heard about it by now, and it did post some results. This version, run by Francis Solona, maybe?
Sure.
Came in 9th, so unfortunate tiebreakers for GPLA there. Otherwise, 4 Snapcaster Mages, 1 Emrakul to search up with Nahiri, obviously 4 Nahiris. The rest is pretty much just Jeskai control. This one happens to run 1 main deck Supreme Verdict, 2 Cryptic Commands, and 1 Tamiyo, which is also interesting. Sometimes in the Tamiyo you can see other Planeswalkers, but either they like Tamiyo or it's the correct choice. I have no idea.
I think they probably just like it.
Maybe a little bit. You also get to run cool cards like Elspeth Sun's Champion in the board.
Oh, no, you know why? Because she works with Nahiri.
Oh, she does tap things. That's right.
Well, she taps permanents.
Yes.
So that's...
But on its own is a good play, and with Nahiri, it's even better.
I don't know. For 5 mana, though, I feel like you just play Icy Manipulator.
Why?
Because it does the same thing.
Well, sure, but doesn't Tamiyo just, like, also do other things?
Yeah.
Yeah, it draws a ton of cards.
Well, in theory. If she survives. Because presumably...
No, when your opponent goes... When your affinity opponent's on the whole, like, Signal Pest plan with Ornithopters, like, and they just swing at you with Ornithopter, Signal Pest for, like, 2 or 3, and you're just like, take 3, untap, pay 5 mana, draw 6 cards. Like, that's pretty good.
Well, that would be 3 cards. And then she dies.
3 cards. Like, draw 3 cards, gain 3 life.
Sure. I don't know. I mean, I suppose you could Cryptic.
Unlike Icy Manipulator, it has a built-in plan B, is really it. It has other things you can do, so...
Like Cryptic tap your team, -2.
That's true, too, yeah. Being able to Cryptic and then untap... Like, Cryptic, tap your team, draw a card. Untap Tamiyo, draw cards.
Yeah. All right. Tamia the Moon Sage, you get a pass. I'll be interested to see what your new card is in Eldritch Moon.
So I just wanted to mention that, but you can peruse the rest of the top 32s of both of these tournaments. There's some interesting stuff there. I definitely recommend it.
Yeah, Snapcaster deck running Rest in Peace.
Done it before. Everything's fine.
It's that Nahiri deck.
Everything's fine.
And all right, let's. Oh wait, what? Oh, round 1. Okay. Whew. I was gonna say down at the bottom on the MTG Goldfish page, they have some of the video coverage. Apparently, somebody was playing Hulk Footsteps, and
gotcha.
Yes, it was. But it was. I didn't see what round it was. I was like, how far could this person possibly have gotten? And it was round 1. So, got it.
They were playing against Abzan Doran.
Yes, and the fact that there's no hyperlink for either one of those decks means they did not make top 32.
It's fine. Everything's fine.
No, it's fine. Everything's awesome. Play whatever you want. Just play it as hard as you can.
So what are you playing as hard as you can?
Eldrazi Taxes till the cows come home. I sat down and played some actual matches in paper against real human beings, and I did pretty well. I'm a 50-50 pre-board against Infect, which surprised me. I was expecting that matchup to be pretty bad, but recall that the version that I am running is takes out the Ether Vials for Leyline of the Void in the main deck, and you get some pretty sweet free wins off that.
Yeah,
bunch of decks just really mucks up their plan. So against Affinity game 1, being able to just knock out their Become Immense plan,
right?
It doesn't completely slow them down, in the sense that, like, you will sometimes still they'll go, Might of Old Krosa Groundswell kill you.
Right.
But they're not going to go try and sneak in my Inkmoth Nexus, Become Immense, Mutagenic Growth kill you.
Right.
So I felt like that was good. Vendetta is one of the best removal spells for little guys. Like any of the little dudes. Right now I'm running 1. I probably will go to 2 in the 75, just because it's so efficient.
Yep.
Like it's single black, it's instant speed, destroy target non-black creature, you lose life equal to its toughness. So in a lot of those games I was able to use Vendetta instead of Path to kill a Noble Hierarch, and it just felt so much better.
Right, that's kind of like the problem that I've had. So going back to just like your version of the deck, it's much more mid-rangey than a lot of the traditional draws. It's not... It's tough, because like you say Eldrazi Taxes, people think they know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
This list is much more mid-rangey with a slightly different game plan. Like, different kind of disruption, really heavy disruption. And getting the ability to run more removal than Path and Thoughtseize, which is what most of the decks run, and sometimes they cut the Thoughtseize, it's just for Path to Exile and maybe a Dismember. It's awful to Path a Birds of Paradise or a Noble Hierarch, because your opponent... I'm happy. If you Path my Birds of Paradise, fantastic, because that means I don't have to worry about it. It's not a liability anymore, and I still ramped.
Yep.
So that's fine with me.
Yeah, so Vendetta, very good. I mean, obviously Wasteland Strangler does a really great job of taking care of those things. Thalia is okay in the match. She's not amazing, because really, unless you have managed to kill all of their mana dorks, they probably, because their stuff is so cheap by design, adding an extra mana isn't really gonna shut them off from doing what they want to do. In your
version, it almost seems better to just cut the Thalias as well and put in more mid-range style cards, like some mix of more removal and a couple other creatures probably.
Yeah, I was that version had blade splicers, two blade splicers, and something else that I can't remember right now. Oh, two blade splicers and Restoration Angel. And Restoration Angel is a really good card.
It is, yeah. And when you're not worried about Thalia and attacking the mana base as much,
right?
Like you can still do, and sometimes it's really relevant, really good. But in the matchups where it's not, getting to the 4 mana to cast Restoration Angel and not worrying about Thalia seems way better.
Yeah. Now I had obviously amazing results with Restoration Angel. She just does all the things.
Yep.
One of the struggles that I had a little bit was getting some sort of meaningful card advantage, because you really don't have the same semi card advantage that you get from Aether Vial in this version. So you rely a little more on the Eldrazi Temple sort of efficiency to get that.
Yeah.
I'm looking at maybe even trying like a Thraben Inspector to run with Eldrazi Displacer, just because this deck wants to grind. You know,
yeah,
getting to a point where I have 5 mana and just hold it up. If I don't have a play, blink Thraben Inspector, sack the clue, draw a card.
Yeah.
And 5 mana is not hard to get to in this deck, because you're basically slowing things down. If you play Thalia on turn 2, you're slowing everything down by at least a turn.
Right.
And then if you have a Leonin Arbiter, it's even slower.
Yeah.
Because then they can't fetch, and if you are like me and you're running Crucible of Worlds, you can just strip mine them every turn and win that way. That's another interaction that is exceptional and exceptionally grindy.
Yeah.
You know, you can throw out that Crucible of Worlds and just Ghost Quarter next turn, play Ghost Quarter, bang, Ghost Quarter, bang. And eventually they will have no lands, and you will have all the lands, and then they will die. The sideboard is very much in flux. And the sideboard that I brought was 3 Leyline of Sanctity, 1 Sword of Light and Shadow, 3 Stony Silence, 2 Thoughtseize, 2 Aven Mind Sensor. The Sword of Light and Shadow is just real good.
No, it is.
Because you can put it on anything, and it automatically becomes great. Yeah. Like there's no time when I was like, oh man, Sword of Light and Shadow. Crap. Like, get this thing out of here. The card's really great.
Yep.
So having access to that, also giving your stuff protection from Path to Exile and Dismember, because apparently everybody just plays Dismember now.
It's not bad.
It's pretty good, because your creatures probably won't go above 5/5 unless they're Reality Smashers. And you know, if you're on the other side of the table for me and I put Sword of Light and Shadow on a Reality Smasher, just pack it in, man. Like, come on. You're done. One of the things also that I'm considering for the sideboard, aside from the Thraben Inspector, which I guess could squeak her way into the main, I haven't figured that out yet, is one of Mirror Crusader.
Yeah.
To go with the sword.
I mean, so it's good with the sword, but Mirror Crusader in general is fairly good right now.
Yeah.
Just because it basically says dies to bolt and path, but because Terminate is kind of where the format went, as well as Dismember now, it does resist a lot of removal, and sometimes you're okay with them bolting a Mirror Crusader and not something else.
Yeah, well, not the Eldrazi Displacer that I need to get value out of everything else.
Well, right, so either Eldrazi Displacer or Leonin Arbiter, which are much more key to your game plan.
Yes.
But if they have a hand that's like bolt, terminate. They're going to spend the bolt on the Arbiter, and maybe their mana doesn't allow them to cast 2 spells that turn.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets tough. Yep.
I did play the mirror match as well, which is odd.
I feel like you should be favored because you're just the same deck but bigger.
Yeah. I mean, I had more... I believe, if I remember correctly, I think it was also about 50-50.
Okay.
Being able to have Restoration Angel, Blink Blade Splicer, like that kind of stuff, where I could be like, okay, I'm just gonna make a Golem, and then I'm going to blink my Restoration Angel, and blink my Blade Splicer, and make more Golems, and blink more stuff, and blink, 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 blink.
Man, you turn your Restoration Angel into like a Vigilant Drake.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I don't know if I would run 2 of them. I think I just want to draw more cards.
So much better than Vigilant Drake.
What?
Oh, Vigilant Drake
isn't
is
Vigilant
a real
Drake
card.
a 2/2?
No, it's a 3/3.
Oh.
It's a 3/3 flyer for 5.
Sure.
And you can pay 2 and a blue to untap it. Which is basically what Eldrazi Displacer is doing to your Restoration Angel with slightly less value, and it costs more for Vigilant Drake, and it's probably like a 6th pick in my white border cube.
Well, no, it creates more value because the Restoration Angel blink is better than his blink.
That's what I'm saying. It creates more value than the Vigilant
Drake.
Drake.
Oh, okay.
No,
I was going to say.
Yeah, no. You can untap Vigilant Drake so many times, though. So many times as you have mana for.
I don't know.
It's so almost vigilant.
It's almost vigilant. I did try running a main deck. Oh, that's what it was. I had a Blight Herder in the side.
Okay.
Because blinking Blight Herder with infinite processing is very good. But it was not good enough for the main deck.
Right.
And I realized that pretty quickly. So I ran it originally in the main deck, and I was like, eh.
So it's better for different roles.
Well, because you can do a bunch of stuff with it, right? Like,
yep.
You blink it, it's big on its own, you can go wide. They're scions, not spawns, so they're 1/1s, and 6/1/1. He basically becomes like Elspeth's Son's champion.
Yeah.
But
so it's versatile and has a different plan than your deck. It's almost like we're making a theme here.
Almost right. It's almost like there's some kind of... Also, it's hilarious to put Sword of Light and Shadow on him.
It is. That's pretty great.
So that's the deck so far. It's still being optimized because the Leyline of the Void plan is very different than the Ether Vial plan. A lot of the sort of 2-drop, 3-drop area that are not Eldrazi didn't translate quite as well.
Right.
Like I was having a lot of difficulty with the mana for Tide Hollow Sculler. So I'm gonna look at
Tide Hollow Sculler still seems good. The Flicker Wisp does not.
No, I cut those. I couldn't
without
Aether
Aether Vial.
Them.
It doesn't seem great.
Yeah, if they had, it's just they're too hard to cast, and they don't like for that same investment of mana. If I have 2 Eldrazi temples, I can have a Reality Smasher.
Sure.
And that just seems better. Tap 3 lands, get a Reality Smasher versus tap 3 lands, get a Flicker Wisp.
Right.
Yep.
Nope. I agree.
I got to do the Cavernous Soul Shuffle though, where like in multiple games I would just use it as mana fixing for whatever I had in my hand.
Yeah,
so
the Cavern's a little tough. Like it helps a lot, but also hurts you a bit.
I was able to. I think
once you cut Thalia, it helps more.
I'm gonna try running a Reflecting Pool.
Okay.
Because that should help.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. For those who don't know, the way that Reflecting Pool works is you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color that any of your lands could produce.
Right.
So because Cavern of Souls has the ability to tap for any color of mana under the restriction that it's the creature, the type that you named, Reflecting Pool doesn't care about that part of it.
Yeah.
All it looks for is, can this tap for, whatever X color of mana? So,
well, it also works better with a Caves of Coelos, because now you have
yes.
a white-black source that doesn't ping you, so you have that as well, or if you are going Reflecting Pool into Shambling Vents, that works as well.
Yep.
So.
No, I have used it in the past. I don't think it ever made it past 2 of, because it is dorky in multiples.
It sure is.
In your opening hand, because you're like, so that it gives you auto mulligans that you wouldn't normally have to take.
Yeah.
Because you're just like, I don't know what I'm going to do with these 2 Reflecting Pools that can't generate any mana. So yeah, use it sparingly, but it is a very powerful card.
For sure.
Show, what are you working on?
Well, not so much working on as learning how to play. I get asked about this deck all the time for some reason, even though I had never played it before and did not have a ton of experience with it. I've only played against it and tested against it. But I finally put together Abzan Company. So, yeah. I mean, I practically owned the deck forever. I needed to buy the Anafenzas and the Viscera Seers and an Orzhov Pontiff. But once I got those 5 cards, I had the deck. It's very good. I played in a Super IQ this past Saturday, and I played in 1 weekly before that. So I have 9 rounds with the deck, and I'm 6-2-1 in like Swiss rounds. So losses to Burn, which was very close, and it was also, I hadn't played the deck for many rounds at that point, so I think it was a little bit not great luck game 3 and me still learning to pilot the deck. I think if I were to play against Burn, it's just going to become a better and better matchup for me. And I lost to Ad Nauseam, partially because of I just forgot how my cards worked.
It happens.
And it's also a very bad matchup. Completely miserable, honestly. It's very bad. You can only really kill them with the infinite damage combo. The infinite life combo actually doesn't do enough.
Yeah.
Like, they have Laboratory Maniac, and your beatdown plan isn't fast enough to kill them. Like, they're going to have enough mana and there are enough tools to win before you can actually kill them. Because all they have to do is, like, cast Phyrexian Unlife on turn 3, and you have to essentially bring them down from 30 life, and their lands don't even really do them damage.
Right.
So they're just starting at 30, and you can't beat down fast enough. You're dirtling too hard.
Yep.
So it's just a bad matchup. I punted a little bit, but I'll never make that mistake again, and that's fine. So other than that, I mean, I played against a lot of real decks. Like, I played against Abzan, I played against Jund, I played against Scapeshift, I played against Zoo, I played against Grixis, Delver, and Control. So I got a lot of reps in against a lot of real decks, and because I was at like a Super IQ, fairly reasonably good opponents.
Yep.
So
I played against Scapeshift. It's a real bad matchup.
For Eldrazi tactics?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a bad matchup for my deck. I guess it seemed fine. You get to win through the infinite damage combo, which is cool. I mean, infinite life combo, because they just can't deal with it.
Yeah, I didn't have Leyline of Sanctity at the time.
Okay.
So that was...
Yeah, I don't even have... So I guess I should talk about like my configuration of Abzan Company. There are a lot of cards that are mandatory. Obviously, your Mana Dorks, your 4 Kitchen Finks, 3 Viscera Seers are mandatory. Your flex slots come into play with, do you run the 4th Viscera Seer? I do. Scavenging Ooze is a very good one at the moment as a one-of. Orzhov Pontiff I like.
Yep.
Sometimes it's just not very good. And in other matchups, like against Affinity or Infect, it's just amazing.
Right.
I forgot to mention the 2 Anafenzas and 2 Maliras, so you have 4 of those combo pieces.
Yep.
But I like the 2-2 split, because sometimes they're better than others, and if you have both in play, not only can you gain infinite life, but you can make your creatures infinitely large, because you just stack the gain life trigger above the bolster trigger every time. So with the bolster trigger on the stack, you sack the Kitchen Finks to Viscers here again. So you gain infinite life, and when you're done with that, you have an infinitely large stack of bolster triggers, and you just go across your board state until they're all with the same toughness, and they're all going to end up at the same size pretty much. The other 1 Spellskite, I was pretty happy with the 1 Spellskite. 1 Fiend Hunter, I was also really happy with that. And then your 1 Murderous Redcap for the infinite damage part of the combo. And then 4 Court of Calling and 4 Collected Company. There's no interaction cards main deck, and I was fine with that, honestly. Game 1, I'm just trying to win as fast as possible. And all your interactions really in the sideboard. So Logan Mize did his write-up a couple weeks ago, which was finally what gave me the kick in the pants to finally build this deck. That, and like I said, I've just been asked about it a lot for some reason. 4 Tide Hollow Sculler in the board, and oh man, is that correct. I'm also not running Voice Resurgence, and I was happy with that too. I spent most of my games maximizing percentage points to combo off, and that led me to much better results than going on the Voice Resurgence beatdown plan most of the time. So I was really happy with that. 3 Path to Exiles, 2 Abrupt Decay in the board. Very happy with that as my 5 non-creature sideboard cards with one exception. 1 Kasali Pride... all of these are going to be one-ofs just as chord targets. Kasali Pride Mage is very good because you can get it in response to a Grafdigger's Cage to blow that up, and you can get it in response with the Court of Calling to anything before it resolves, and then blow something up later. But I also have a Rex Sage, because sometimes you just want to get something, blow it up, and keep the creature afterwards to beat down. So one of the, I guess, half not real decks, but I've seen it a bunch, the red-white prison deck with Blood Moon, Ensnaring Bridge, that sort of thing. I played against that, and that's an instance where you really want Rex Sage to come in, blow up Ensnaring Bridge, and then attack that way. Courser of Prefix. This was probably the weirdest one to me when Logan Mize put up his list, because it just seemed odd. But against Burn, against Jund, against Grixis, against Junk, it's just very good. It's a 2/4, which is cool. It blocks all of Burn's creatures really well. And if they're going to 2-for-1 themselves, fantastic. The only way they generally don't have to 2-for-1 themselves is if you block Monastery Swiftspear and then they bolt your Courser.
Right. So
just don't do that. Is really my advice there.
There you go.
No,
you heard it here first, folks. Don't do that.
Well,
it's a bad plan.
That's the thing with this deck that I've noticed, though. It's just so powerful, but there are tons of tiny mistakes that you just need to make sure you don't make. And blocking their Eidolons and Goblin Guides before their Swiftspears is just super relevant. Doesn't matter how much damage you're taking, because you can pull out late enough if you just need to live long enough. And Courser kind of helps that by blocking really well, gaining a bunch of life. It helps filter through your deck really quickly, especially through an opposing Goblin Guide, which is pretty great. And yeah, I was really happy with it. It does help bring some card advantage in against Jund, Junk, and Grixis, which is cool. And it doesn't die to Bolt, which is also very good.
Pretty great.
Last couple ones, I ran a Fulminator Mage. I will not run it again. It was mediocre at best. Even against Tron, I don't think I would have... It doesn't do enough, honestly. And that's just kind of a problem. Because, I don't care how many times, Emrakul attacks me, I just won't have lands, but I'm not dead.
Right.
So let's count our libraries, folks. And it's the same with a lot of things. Like the Fulminator Mage I just really wasn't happy with. I had it in because normally Fulminator in Jund I like bringing in the Mirror and bringing in against Junk and Grixis, and I just didn't want to do that. I already had card advantage with Courser. I had extra threats with Scavenging Ooze, and I had removal spells I wanted to bring in, and Hollow Sculler was huge in that. Fulminator Mage just sat in my sideboard all game. One card that Logan Mize liked and that the top 8 list from GPLA had is 1 Pharika, God of Affliction. So technically a 3-mana creature, so you can cord for 3 or get it off of CoCo, which is neat. Indestructible, if you have 7 Devotion of green and black, it is a creature, so it's indestructible 5/5. Or you can pay a green and black to exile a target creature card from a graveyard, so not any card, just creature cards. And then that owner of the card gets a 1/1 green-black snake with Death Touch. It's very slow at grinding out value, honestly. I like the fact that you can get value out of your graveyard, and I like the fact that you can remove things from your opponent's graveyard, but overall, not thrilled with it.
I'd be interested to see if the way that it was used was to create extra blockers for yourself at instant speed.
Yeah, which is one of the things that I'm saying. Like it can make value for you as well.
Or if, it was, I just need to get your whatever X out of the way so that I can.
And the flexible nature of the card is that you can do either. But at 2 mana each activation, one of which is black, which is the color you have the least of in the deck. Like it's the one you're splashing. It's very difficult and very slow.
Yeah.
So I did not like Pharika. I thought I wanted something more tuned to, yes, I can get some value out of myself or I can mess up my opponent's graveyard.
Yeah.
So I ran Loaming Shaman in that slot.
Yeah, I've seen that before.
3/2 for 3. It comes into play. Target player shuffles target cards in their graveyard back into their library. So sometimes it just comes into play and it's like, hey, that thing you're targeting with Snapcaster Mage, shuffle that and all of your fetch lands back into your deck. Or it comes into play and it's like, man, I want these like 2 CoCos that I whiffed on and this Eternal Witness and value cards in my graveyard back in my deck.
Yeah.
So it plays the same role of getting value from yours graveyard or hosing your opponent's graveyard, but it does it better.
Yep.
And it actually can mess up graveyard decks and delve, especially on the play. And I did get to do that. I was able to go turn 1 birds. My opponent was kind of like Serum Visionsing and then Thought Scouring himself, and I was able to get Loaming Shaman into play before he delved for Tasigur.
Okay.
And just like take all your lands and take your Thought Scour and put them back in your deck. And that was something. And it is a 3/2. Like, it's nothing to sneeze at. Like, it's a 3-powered creature that gets value. So I picked that over Pharika. And the last card is a Maelstrom Pulse. Maelstrom Pulse is real good with all the Nahiri decks running around. Random Planeswalkers, random permanents you can't normally destroy. So that's the 6th non-creature spell in the sideboard. And it's just really versatile and really good value. So I liked it.
Yep. All right. So kind of what we've been getting at is, what does your deck really want to do? So my deck, for example, I want to grind you out. I want to attack your resources. I want to tax your mana base. I want to tax your ability to cast spells. And I do, in the sideboard, try and focus on things that will allow me to do that even more. So adding Disruption allows me to tax your ability to draw cards. It allows me to pick off combo pieces that would beat me before I'm able to, really kind of get control.
Right.
And that is something that, sort of mid-range decks have always been and will always be soft to fast combo decks.
Yeah.
Because they just really, really need to get, well, they're control decks, right? They need to gain control of the situation, and if they can't, then they're going to have a rough time. The big one that I will say, if you're going to use ley lines, obviously you can't just use one.
Yeah, it's true.
The whole point of a ley line is that you get to use it, or you get to play it for free.
Yep.
And so if you're not playing it for free, as a one-of, you're going to be mulliganing a lot.
Yeah.
To the point where it's kind of silly. So don't fall into that trap, and you'll be much happier. The things that I bring in, I feel like they, generally speaking, either reinforce my core strategy or give me a way to sort of handle things that I wouldn't otherwise be able to handle. So, Sword of Light and Shadow is a great example of that.
Sure.
Right? If I'm up against a deck that's just like all removal and is white X, black X, something like that, I can bring that in and ride a single creature to victory much of the time.
Yep.
Because chances are they don't have reality hemorrhage, double reality hemorrhage,
sure.
or, something like that. It's just not, that's not a thing.
So I guess what we're really kind of like leading into is our main topic of not really how to sideboard, but the things you need to keep in mind to build your sideboard correctly and sideboard for matchups correctly. And really the 4 points that we've highlighted and you alluded to is you really have to know your role. Yep. You have to know what your deck does game 1, and you need to know what your deck's going to do for game 2 and 3 of a given matchup. You need to anticipate your opponent too. Your opponent might do one thing game 1, but if they have the option to bring in 6 to 8 different cards against you, or they know how to mess you up, you need to make sure that doesn't happen and plan accordingly. More often than not, you want to do this without diluting your deck.
Right.
You can't just play a bunch of cards so that you don't lose the game. You have to sideboard in a way that still furthers your plan on winning the game, furthers your deck's plan, and doesn't just water it down.
Right. Well, think about the best example that I can think of off the top of my head is the Thoughtseizes that Affinity runs out of the side.
Mm-hmm.
They run enough that you can actually grab the Stony Silence that someone is bringing in against you.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to bring in Stony Silence. You need to have a way to deal with that. The best way to do that is snatch it out of their hand.
Sure.
Because they probably mulliganed into one of them, fairly certainly didn't mulligan into 2 of them.
Right.
And from there, you're really just gonna make sure that, you get the thing that they brought in. You sideboard for their sideboard cards.
Yep. And lastly, narrow cards, and I mean actually narrow cards, are not good. Try to avoid them as much as possible, with very, very few but key important exceptions we'll get to. So those are our main points, and we're going to kind of break them down.
Yep.
And hopefully put this
hopefully
how to sideboard request to rest.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll talk about it again.
I'm sure we will. Alrighty. So, first one, know your role. And another way to say it is, what is your deck's goal? What are you actually trying to do in a game of Magic? And once you have that question answered, which you should when you build your deck, the next question is, how does your deck change that? How does your deck change to accomplish that goal in a given matchup? And alternatively, does your strategy change at all? So, for instance, and one of the reasons we talked about what we're playing in paper right now is because we're going to reference them a lot in this on purpose. For Abzan Company, it is a toolbox combo deck with a plan B.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a really good example of being able to recognize what your role is going to be in a matchup, sideboard accordingly, mulligan accordingly, and make sure that happens. So, for example, sometimes against Infect is a really great example. Against Infect, a lot of times you're going to cut some number of your kitchen finks because the life just doesn't matter.
Right.
And you're going to be bringing in your Tide Hollow Scullers, your Path to Exiles, your Abrupt Decays, your Maelstrom Pulses. And you're turning from a combo creature toolbox deck into a slightly smaller Abzan Midrange deck.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because that's how you're going to win this particular matchup. And so certain decks, like Abzan Company, are very flexible in that way, and the sideboard reflects that. Most of the sideboard, although a big piece of the sideboard is a lot of one-of creatures that you can fetch off of Court of Calling, a majority of the sideboard is almost like a package you can bring in,
mm-hmm.
where you just turn into a mid-range creature deck instead of a combo deck, or alongside a combo deck. And you need to understand and build your sideboard so that you can do that and understand when to sideboard like that.
Yep.
And yours is a little similar. The only thing that I would suggest for the whole mid-range Eldrazi deck is sometimes you're not going to be able to outgrind your every single opponent.
True.
And so one thing that's always, and this is why I like Mirran Crusaders in that build, Mirran Crusaders is a great example of sometimes you need to be faster. Mm-hmm. And have higher threat density. And so you bring in Mirran Crusaders instead of some of the other disruption tools that aren't good. Like if Thalia's not good,
right,
you can board into a much more aggressive creature.
Yep. Yeah, and boy, he is aggressive. B-E aggressive.
So, although it's really important, it's essential to know what your deck is supposed to do and what the goal is, you should also recognize it's a little bit fluid sometimes for certain decks. There are some that this doesn't apply to completely, and those are mainly the linear aggro and combo decks, where really you just kind of have the plan A. Affinity, its plan A is pretty much bringing your opponent's life total to 0, and you're not really changing from that.
Right.
You get to substitute in a couple of interesting tools. Probably the least, not popular, but the one I guess people would forget about is Aether Grid.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, which is good for a couple reasons. One of my favorite reasons, and this happened at a win-in on Saturday, Affinity player had Aether Grid out, opponent resolved Stony Silence. One of them was unhappy.
Yeah.
It was not the Affinity player.
Should have brought your Pithing, you know?
Yeah, and that was a great example of something that we'll touch on later, where like Stony Silence just didn't shut off Affinity, and Stony Silence shutting off Affinity is kind of like Blood Moon. It's only good if you can capitalize on that and apply pressure. So,
yeah. Well, it's also the same reason why like Boil isn't great against people. People would think that Boil against Merfolk would be a slam dunk, and It's actually terrible because Boyle exists, they do play 12 islands, but they also play like 10 blue sources that are not islands. Actually, probably more than that. Manamo, Wanderwine Hub.
Yeah, there's normally one of each of the blue legendary lands. 4 Wanderwine Hubs, not even 4 white, just because it doesn't lose to Choke or Boil.
Right.
So.
Oh yeah, Choke is the other one.
Yep. So yeah, it's very important to know where you're trying to be, and don't be afraid to get more aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned it with the Eldrazi list, but when I play Jund, one of my favorite sideboard cards has always been 3 Kitchen Finks, and people are like, oh yeah, 3 Kitchen Finks, that's really good against Burn. But it's also really good in matchups where I know I can't outgrind and I really need to apply pressure.
Right.
So I want to be more aggressive. I raise my creature count and I just slam in the 3 Kitchen Finks.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be very, very good. I mean, it's a 3-powered creature that doesn't die to a single removal spell except for Path.
Yep.
So it's very good in that instance. So don't be afraid to change what your deck's doing if you can. Once again, it doesn't really apply to decks like Affinity and Infect and Suicide Zoo, Bushwhacker Zoo, which I'm also probably going to reference quite a bit. And especially with those decks, you really just have your one goal, and it's hard to deviate from it.
Right.
And the biggest problem that you really have is diluting your deck. With these mid-range and control decks, you can bring in 8 cards.
Right.
I mean, the Tide Howler, Sculler, Path, Abrupt Decay package is 9 cards on its own.
Right.
And when you're playing that against Jund or Junk, you're just like, well, these Noble Hierarchs and Birds of Paradise were cute. Those are out, these are in, because you're in a top deck war. Do you really want to top deck Birds of Paradise, or do you want to top deck Tide Howler Sculler?
Right.
So you take out your bad cards, you put in your good ones. And you didn't dilute your deck doing it, you just changed the game plan a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But for decks where you can't change your game plan, it's a lot harder to not dilute your deck. So you just physically have to not bring in too many cards. And make sure you bring in impactful cards, and ideally cards that help you win a certain matchup while also progressing your main game plan. So I know the one example I wanted to do of this was, this kind of goes hand in hand with narrow cards are bad, except sometimes in these linear decks, it's the narrow cards you want.
Mm-hmm.
Stony Silence in Little Zoo, however, is a bad example. You don't want that type of card in Zoo all the time. You want something like Destructive Revelry, Tin Street Hooligan?
Tin Street Hooligan.
Tin Street Hooligan, or Vandal Blast, or Ancient Grudge, instead of Stony Silence. Because all of those cards, especially Tin Street Hooligan and Destructive Revelry, really help push your game plan while messing up your opponent and allow you to be the 1 or 2 turns faster that you're trying to do. Because really up against those decks, you can't change your game plan. You're an aggro deck. You just need to find a way to disrupt your opponent enough to be faster than them.
Yep. And that's, you really can find ways to keep your combo intact, because you're just like you're all in and you just get all inner.
Yeah.
And I don't know, because I do not play a lot of combo decks. I'm not as familiar. I'm familiar with it like from a philosophy standpoint. I think that if your deck only has one way to win,
Yep.
that you have to be okay committing to that, and just understand that you may have to cut off other lines of play.
Right.
And just, that's the nature of the beast. So I wouldn't be fine with that. Like, that would drive me nuts. but that's why I don't play combo decks.
Well, this is not just combo, it's like the linear aggro, like Affinity, Bushwhacker Zoo, the Goblins deck.
Yeah, like, but a lot of those even I would categorize those as like soft combo decks, because I mean they really and truly, right? What are they doing? They are trying to create a combination of cards and the combination of cards will result in you instantly winning the game.
Yep.
You know, and that combination of cards is Burning Tree Emissary, Burning Tree Emissary, Burning Tree Emissary, Reckless Bushwhacker, you're dead. You know, like Goblin Guide into bang, 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 bang.
Oh, no, Experiment 1's where it's at.
Experiment 1, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and I like the versions of that deck that started running Vexing Devil instead of Tarmogoyf. It's because it evolves Experiment 1.
Oh, yeah.
And then they're like, would you like me to have a 4/3 or take 4 or...
And the answer is always... I don't know, depends on the deck.
Do they have the Bolt or the Path? Well, I guess they're taking 4.
Right.
Like...
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
Just kind of how it works, but... Yeah, so with a lot of these decks, it's hard to not dilute them. You really need to basically... And like I said, I'm going to be using Bushwhacker Zoo as the example.
Yeah.
You are a very fast, all-in aggro deck. The problem can be Affinity can sometimes outrace you, Infect can sometimes outrace you, and sometimes you have to worry about control deck stabilizing.
Yeah.
So your entire sideboard is only worried about Affinity, Infect, other fast combo decks that can race you, and a couple of anti-control cards. And that's it. That's the end of your list. You're not going to turn into a mid-range deck.
Right.
I don't think you have that flexibility. The old Little Zoo decks had a little bit more flexibility, especially like even the Burning Tree Emissary, Tarmogoyf, Knight of the Reliquary, where you curve out at Reliquary and still ran CoCo.
Yep. But
that was like your only 3-drop. Those were a little bit more flexible. Now you're basically curving out at 2. You don't have that option.
Right.
And so you just have to make your opponent stumble and capitalize on that. So this is a deck where Blood Moon's really good.
Yep.
Like, you shut off your opponent's mana base, and you're going to kill them 3 turns after that, or less. And that's good enough, usually. Stony Silence, like I said, it's a go-to for a lot of people, but Stony Silence is another card you really have to capitalize on. If you're not going to kill them a few turns after you resolve Stony Silence, it's not that great. It's okay.
Yeah.
And a late game Stony Silence against Affinity doesn't do anything, because at that point they have like 2 or 3 lands besides Darksteel Citadel, and they're already got their creatures in play. It's not as disruptive.
Right.
So you really have to pick and choose, and instead of running a bunch of 1-ofs in your aggro deck, you really want 3-ofs and 4-ofs and bring that in.
Yeah. Well, figure out, because they really, that's the kind of deck where there are some things that you just straight up lose to.
A little bit, yeah.
I mean, we'll think
Trying to think.
Life gain against burn, right? If you're a burn player and you're like, well, here's what I lose to. Soul Sisters. The only way that they can beat Soul Sisters is more Skullcracks. If they're not already running 8 Skullcrack effects, more Skullcracks. Or Leyline of Punishment. So pick whichever one you prefer and run them. You know, you're running probably 6, like you're running probably 4 Tarkus Command and 2 Skullcracks in the main, 2 Skullcracks in the side, and then, you know, maybe Leyline of Punishment.
And this is kind of where it also comes into, like, how narrow are you comfortable letting your sideboard cards be? Do you want to spend slots on Leyline of Punishment when you have 8 Skullcrack effects and can generally beat things like Kitchen Finks and a single Feed the Clan and stuff like that?
Right.
Or is there going to be enough Soul Sisters, if that's your worry, or Norrøn Sisters, to run Leyline of Punishment, or do you just scoop up your cards sometimes against that, and that's it? And that's just something you have to kind of decide on as well. Is it worth using up your sideboard slots on a card that affects basically one matchup that you might not see a lot? And you kind of have to weigh it, because this is the other thing. We, for general purposes, look at GP meta and Magic Online meta games,
Right.
where it may or may not be worth it. Like, if you're going to GPs and large tournaments, no, there's not going to be enough Soul Sisters for you to dilute your deck with Leyline of Punishment.
Right.
If you're playing Magic Online, there's a super fun $30 Soul Sisters deck that you might run into like 7 times a day, and yes, you're going to want Leyline of Punishment.
Yeah.
But for most people that just play at their LGS, it's a judgment call.
Yep.
It's up to you. Or play Junburn.
With
Reign of Gore.
I don't know if you need to play Reign of Gore.
It's better than Leyline of Punishment if you're in Jund.
I guess. But
Well, because it's also a burn spell. That's even better.
Well, but it's not. If you're in Junburn, it's Tainted Remedy.
No, because Reign of Gore is 2 mana, and are you gaining life? You already cut your Lightning Helixes, because you're not running white.
Sure.
Or you just run both and play Mardu Burn. No fear.
Yeah.
Resolve your Lightning Helix before your Reign of Gore. You're fine.
Yep. Boom. Nailed it.
So besides just like the broad, almost mostly true statement of narrow cards are bad, the real point is that versatile cards are good when you can take advantage of them, and your Eldrazi deck can do that very well.
Right. My current sideboard is 3 Leyline of Sanctity, 1 Wrath of God, 1 Flaying Tendrils, 1 Mirran Crusader, 1 Sword of Light and Shadow, 2 Stony Silence, 2 Ghostly Prison, 1 Vendetta, 1 Crucible of Worlds, and 2 Thoughtseize. There are matches where Thalia is bad, and those matches are sort of a blessing and a curse. The blessing is it allows me to run more spells, and I don't have to rely on my creatures as much to kind of do the things that I want done.
Yeah.
But it lets me bring in Thoughtseize against combo decks. It lets me bring in Ghostly Prison against aggro decks. I can bring, because she's not great against like creature aggro decks, because you're not gonna get, they're generally speaking not relying on spells, non-creature spells to win the game. And a 2/1 first strike is a legendary 2/1 first strike.
Right. So like, I'm not gonna say it's never been relevant, but like,
sure. Oh, hey,
it could have always.
You need somebody to block
been
a Goblin
something
Guide.
else.
She's your lady.
Like that's the thing. If you need it to block an X2, sure. But if you need it to block anything else that's not an X1, you're not in great shape.
Right. The Leyline of Sanctity is important, and it is broad in ways that people don't, I think, give it enough credit for. I will bring it in a lot of times against Jund, against control decks that I know are running Disruption.
Yeah.
Because, man, let me tell you, one of the things about this deck is it mulligans horribly. So if sometimes you have to keep a suboptimal 7 because the chances of your 6 being that much better are pretty low. So being that you sometimes have to keep suboptimal hands, a turn 1 Thoughtseize from your Jund player is just going to destroy your entire plan.
Yeah.
Obviously for burn, the creatures are already taken care of. Yeah. I can turn 2 Wasteland Strangler, kill your Wild Nacatl, and then Eldrazi Displacer, and then just keep doing it. Bang, 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 bang. You know, like every turn, just bang, bang, bang. So that part of it is fine. The things that I have to contend with are Boros Charm to the face, Lava Spike, you know, just bolts upstairs. That kind of stuff just kills faster than I can keep up with. And one of the ways that I normally establish control is trying to attack the mana base.
Yep.
I can't really attack the mana base of a deck that only needs 2 lands to run.
Right.
You know, like if you can get them, you know, like Arbiter and, you know, Ghost Quarter there, whatever. Okay, sure. But even so, if you're not drawing, you know, Thought Not Seer, Reality Smasher, like somebody to clean up crew, every turn they're still going to be able to kill one of your creatures, hit you for 3.
Right.
You know, and they're going to draw another land.
Yeah.
Obviously. Like you just can't value grind their lands because they're too efficient.
Right.
So like that's not a winning play. But you just need some breathing room. A couple of different wraths. Straight up Wrath of God. Man. Against mid-range decks, it's just lights out. You know?
It's just like 1/10 the cost of damnation and does the same thing in your deck.
That is correct.
So good.
Yep. Yeah, it's super, super economical. Get the revised one so that people will have to ask you what buried means.
Good.
Yeah, and don't lie to people and tell them it means exiled. It just means destroyed.
Well, and can't be regenerated.
Yes.
So
I think it says can't be regenerated
that
in the old version.
I think that's different because buried was the keyword for destroyed and can't be regenerated.
Oh.
So the unlimited version is all creatures are destroyed. Well, one of the versions of Wrath of God, they changed it from buried to destroy and can't be regenerated. I just don't know when they did it. Yeah. I'll look it up while you keep.
I'd have to look. So if you can use the first couple of turns to not overextend your board.
Oh, that's super interesting.
Qua?
I'm sorry, you were actually saying something important, and here I am just with trivia about the term buried. Buried wasn't originally a magic term, and they made it a magic term, and then they were like, which is I think one of the best design decisions they made, and this is how I approach game design, buried basically invalidated another mechanic of regenerate.
Yes.
And so they started taking the text cannot regenerate off of cards.
Yes.
And I think that was good to not have mechanics fight each other.
Yep.
But they came up with the term apparently in revised because the unlimited version of Wrath of God says, or I'm sorry, in unlimited they did it. In alpha and beta, it says all creatures in play are destroyed and cannot regenerate, whereas unlimited says all creatures in play are destroyed and can't be regenerated, and then in revised, all creatures in play are buried. 4th edition, bury all creatures. And it kept bury all creatures for 5th edition as well, and then 6th edition, they got rid of
they cleaned
buried.
It up.
No, just destroy all creatures that can't be regenerated. It went back to the original text.
Okay. So against a mid-range deck, you can, wait for them to build out their board a little bit, slow them down with Leonin Arbiter, hopefully sandbag another Leonin Arbiter in your hand, Wrath, next turn put out Leonin Arbiter as they're trying to rebuild, then you start, the Wasteland Strangler train, you start the, if they're trying to win through creatures, you can really take them down, put them back 4 for 1, 5 for 1. That's value that is hard to come back from.
Yep.
Flame Tendrils or Drown in Sorrow.
Yeah.
Either the 3-mana wraths or, in different decks, Anger of the Gods, Pyroclasm, like any of the mini wraths, do a lot of good things.
Yeah, and we've had this discussion before. Normally, I'm actually in the Drown in Sorrow camp.
Right.
But because you have processors, the Flaying Tendrils I like here.
Yeah, I'm not against Drown in Sorrow, because the deck definitely does struggle with card selection, card advantage. Flaying Tendrils Exile is just a backup in case you had to keep a hand that didn't have a leyline in it, like an opener that didn't have a leyline in it.
Right.
And, exile your Kitchen Finks, exile your Anafenza, exile your, against Green Stompy, which you wouldn't think, but I'm here to tell you that Strangler Rootgeist is insane.
Sure is.
Like, that card is just really good and does not nearly see enough play.
It's really good with Experiment 1, too.
Yep.
Because then it's just like, they're swinging at you on turn 2 with two powered creatures. If you block the Strangle Rootgeist, it's just going to come back and evolve Experiment 1, so you're forced to block Experiment 1 instead.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah, so play Strangle Rootgeist. Card's real good. The Mirran Crusader sword will usually come in as a package. There are definitely times where you will be able to just go Mirran Crusader, sword, equip, win the game.
Yeah, so you chose Sword of Light and Peace. Is that for
Light and Shadow.
Light and Shadow, was that for the card advantage aspect, or?
Well, it's two things. Mirran Crusader comes stock with pro green and pro black. So once you have Sword of Light and Shadow on him, he gains pro white.
Yeah.
So between pro white, pro green, and pro black, if they don't have a roast, he's not going to die to anything that is commonly played.
Right. Yeah. The only thing that I have run sort of War and Peace before with Crusader.
Yep.
In my original, actually, first Death and Taxes Modern list, it ran 2 sort of War and Peace with main deck Mirran Crusaders. And obviously one of the things is it's missing only pro blue.
Yeah.
But it also does a lot of damage because it deals damage to your opponent equal to the number of cards in their hand, and then you gain life equal to the number of cards in your hand. So it does depend. The Light and Shadow, obviously, you gain 3 life and get to return a creature card from your graveyard.
Yes.
That value is just so incredible when you're playing Wasteland Stranglers and Tidehouse Gullers and Restoration Angels.
And when you're doing it
close.
twice.
Right, yeah. Well, that's the big thing with Mirran Crusader. Like, if they have... It's essentially doing 2 damage for every card in their hand.
Right.
And it's also hitting them for 8. So if they have 4 cards in their hand, Mirran Crusader with Sword of War and Peace was generally a one-shot kill.
Yeah.
Because that's just 16 damage. You probably got in some chip damage somewhere.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I don't even sort of Feast and Famine I don't hate. It overlaps.
It's very powerful. It gives you the mana advantage you were looking for with no Aether Vial.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't give you a protection advantage, but also you don't have to put it on him. You can certainly put it on anything. I mean, put it on a Wasteland Strangler. A 5/4 is a very, very, it's a very good thing.
Yep.
So I guess you could, in theory, run an entire Steel Shaper's Gift package.
I don't really like that. I think you just kind of have to pick the sword that fits your metagame.
Yeah.
And it's not really worth running the package there.
Yeah. I mean, you could even... in my head, you could make an argument for running both Light and Shadow and War and Peace.
That definitely, I would agree with that a lot more. And just have, because now you're just running 2 swords, both of which are good with pretty much any of your creatures.
Right.
And go to town.
Yep. Then Stony Silence obviously is for affinity. Also very good in the mirror match.
Yeah.
Against Merfolk, against other, Death and Taxes lists, straight Death and Taxes lists that are running Aether Vial.
Yeah. The reason Stony Silence gets a pass on the whole narrow cards are bad statement is because so many decks right now are utilizing artifacts.
Right.
Lantern Control. And like you said, obviously Affinity is the first one that comes to mind, but Lantern Control, Merfolk, the new Death and Taxes lists, when so many decks are using artifacts, then it becomes less narrow. But that's the thing. It's no longer narrow. It's hitting 4 decks that were at these GPs.
Right.
So it's no longer narrow, but there are so many cards in Modern that are just on the line.
Yeah. Well, the other thing with Stony Silence in terms of just raw power level is it doesn't have the unless they're mana abilities caveat.
Right.
And that's unreal. Shut off your lands for 2 mana is gigantic. I mean, that's just...
Especially because... And it really does shut off essentially 8 lands because of Darksteel Citadel and Mox Opal. Right. And slightly more than that with Springleaf Drum.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you make a deck around Aether Vial, for example...
Right.
You are shorting other resources because Aether Vial provides so much efficiency and so much virtual mana that you're putting them at a double disadvantage by disabling it, because it's not like they're going to have 4 Aether Vials and 24 lands.
Right.
If those Aether Vials get shut off, they're not just going to be like, oh yeah, I'm not worried about it. I'll top deck that 3rd land. I'll top deck that 4th land.
It depends. I think in the Death and Taxes lists, Death and Taxes actually run Stony Silence. So it's not as, against that, it's not as good. But up against stuff like Merfolk and even just the kind of tribal, roguish decks like Werewolves, those are the ones that really rely on it for the mana and instant speed ability, whereas Death and Taxes is more for value. Because I know my list ran 22 lands, and I ran Stony Silence on the board.
Yep.
And with Death and Taxes, sometimes Aether Vial is not that great, and you just don't need it. So,
Ghostly Prison. Ghostly Prison comes in against decks that are susceptible to land-based disruption.
Well, decks that are going wide.
Yeah, I mean, decks that are going wide, but also, right, it's an extra taxation. Even a single creature win con deck that, they're like, okay, great, I stuck my whatever.
Well, the one that comes to mind, so obviously the first ones are Affinity, Bushwhacker Zoo, Goblins, and Burn.
Yep.
Beyond that, though, the one that comes to mind to me is the Primeval Titan Through the Breach lists. Because now you're Through the Breach to get your hasty Emrakul or Primeval Titan costs 7 mana, not 5. Or you're just paying 5 mana to ramp 2 lands with Primeval Titan, and that's not great.
Yep. And then if Thalia's out,
right, then it
more. And if
Leonin Arbor's out, then it's 5 mana to have Primeval Titan enter the battlefield and then sacrifice it at the end of turn.
Yep.
That's not very good.
No, that's not great. But if you can, if you're on the strip mine plan, where you bring in Crucible of Worlds, and you really just maximize the strip mine.
Yep.
Ghostly Prison in that instance becomes better Ensnaring Bridge,
right?
Because you can still attack, do whatever you want, build out your board a little bit, and then.
Yeah, I tested a lot with Ghostly Prison, and I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Even when you're not attacking the mana, because it is just a lot. Even against Infect, where they are just attacking with one creature, if they have to pay 2 mana into attacking, they're not using that mana towards pump spells.
Yeah.
And it's going to take them longer to kill you.
Yep.
And that, if you're applying pressure, can make all the difference.
And 2 mana in Infect average is going to amount to 6 damage. Just,
yeah, it could.
You know.
And you're cutting it off so much is the big... Especially if they're on the Inkmoth Nexus plan.
Right. Because
now it's like they can't tap their Inkmoth Nexus for mana. They have to spend a mana to activate it and have 2 others. Like, if they're on the Inkmoth Nexus plan with Hierarch, they're just going to swing in for 2 a bunch, and you have to hope they don't have all of the mutagenic growths.
Yep. 1 Vendetta, like I said, card's too good to run just one of. This is, I guess you could also, in theory, you could make the argument that it could also be a gut shot, because what it really does is like kill X1s and X2s.
I think just having the versatility of the Vendetta is obviously better. Like we've been stressing, the versatility is key.
Man, Vendetta to kill Mana Dorks, Vendetta to kill Bobs, Vendetta to kill, like those kinds of things. And,
not Bobs, but
not Bobs, sorry. Sometimes it turns a Tarmogoyf into a Vexing Devil, where you're just like, look, I can take this hit one time and have it be dead, and then I don't have to worry about it.
It's good against a lot of things. It's good against Insectile Aberration.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wouldn't you take 2 to not take 3 every turn?
Yeah.
Like that blind flipped Insectile Aberration on turn 1, just like, well, Vendetta it.
Yep. The Crucible of Worlds already talked about. And then 2 Thoughtseizes. Once again, this kind of mid-range control deck really suffers against fast aggro without disruption.
Mm-hmm.
Running Tidehollow Sculler, a non-zero amount of the time you're going to get jammed up on casting Tidehollow Sculler on time just because of the mana.
That is so weird. I really have to look at your mana base.
I had that happen to me regularly.
That is, I have to look at your mana base because I didn't have nearly as that many problems. I mean, granted, once again, I was playing Aether Vial, which settles some things, but even then, like, there weren't that many times where I couldn't cast Tidehollow Scholar on turn 3.
Sure. But so between Tidehollow Scholar or possibly suboptimally Brain Maggot, just because it's easier to cast, and Thought-Knot Seer, like there's a lot of disruption built into the deck.
Yep.
But there's no disruption on turn 1.
Yeah.
So, for the deck that needs, for the opponent that needs to set up, their turn 3 kill.
Right.
If you just go Thoughtseizure through the Breach, and then they've got, a handful of whatever, Simian Spirit Guides and Emrakul that they're never going to cast. It's not bad.
No, could be worse.
Yep. And then you get Leonin Arbiter out, and then Value Train. So each of those things either completely... Actually, I would say the deck doesn't even... I was going to say... My thought was you should be running some kind of just total game-winning Silver Bullet Hoser for matches that are really bad for you. But
in mid-range decks, you never have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean if I'm 50-50 against much of the field, that I'm likely to come up against in a big event, I really don't need to go crazy.
Nope.
And, run 4 Leyline of Sanctity, run 4, 3 ofs and 4 ofs for everything.
Right. Because
probably will do okay, and I can just get some percentage off of drawing that sideboard card at some point.
Yeah. And all the cards you mentioned really do highlight the point we were trying to make, where the versatility, when you can take advantage of it, is really the most important part. You don't want a sideboard card for just one matchup, no matter how bad that matchup is. And, like, for instance, the ley line. Like, you have it against burn. You have it against heavy disruption. You have it against ad nauseum, which is huge. Now they're forced to go for the Lab Maniac kill if they have it. So, even Leyline, which is probably bordering on the most one-sided card, has at least 3 or 4 matchups where you bring it in. So it's not versatile.
Yep. The other part of this is you know that your opponent is going to know, right? Your opponent is trying not to lose.
Yeah.
And they're trying not to lose to your sideboard cards.
Yep.
And even though we do advocate spicy sideboard tech, there are some things that are a given at a competitive level.
Yeah.
You can't just fill your sideboard with 15 unknown cards that are just going to get your opponent, because there aren't 15 cards that are power level high enough to just really get those. Otherwise, people would already be playing them.
Yeah, I think the key, and this is kind of where the not so set in stone, line in the sand is drawn here. Most of what we talked about as far as like versatile cards can mostly be taken up by mid-range and control decks. That's where you get the spicy stuff. A lot of times you have to anticipate your opponent bringing in hate if you're a very linear deck, or if you basically have 95% of your games ending the same way if you win.
Yep.
So you don't need the versatility. You need to not get hosed by answers. And so your versatility comes in how many 1 and 2 mana ways can you mess up your opponent's disruption. And you see this the most in stuff like Infect and Bogles even, and sometimes Burn.
Yep.
So
even some of the zoo lists too.
And the Burn Zoo umbrella.
Sure.
So I mean, everyone's gonna bring in. Most people, if they have it, are gonna lean on Spellskite against Bogles.
Sure.
Because it tends to be pretty good against Bogles.
It's very good.
So Bogles has answers for that. They have removal spells. They can bring in extra removal spells. That's all good.
Twisted Image.
But, once again, you need to actually bring them in.
Right.
And so that's your more so versatility as opposed to a mid-range deck. You need to find things that are going to answer the most things. If Spellskite's a problem, then you want a way to destroy Spellskite. But if other enchantments or creatures or artifacts are going to be a problem, you want to blow up as many of those as possible. So you want naturalized effects.
Right.
And not just... Like, Infect has Twisted Image, but out of the board, they have... Nature's Claim. Or the new one, destroy an artifact or enchantment with converted mana cost 3 or less.
I don't remember what it's called, but I will.
Ben Stark ran it in his Suicide Zoo list. If that speeds things up.
Is it Natural State?
Yes, Natural State.
Yep.
So you have Natural State, which is going to answer most of the things that are going to mess you up. You see this a lot with the Dredge decks as well. Most graveyard interaction is enchantment or artifact based. So if you're running Dredge, you're probably running Green from Life from the Loam. You really want a lot of some number of natural states, some number of Ancient Gruds, some number of Ray of Revelation. I'm saying the Ancient Grudge, and I think it is Ray of Revelation. It's the Ancient Grudge for enchantments. It costs 1 and a white, but the flashback cost is a green.
Yes.
That way you can dredge it into your yard and still do it. And you might want 2 of each or 3 of each. And that takes up most of your sideboard. But that's how you're losing the game. That's what everyone's going to be doing against you.
Right.
Here's your answer for it.
Well, yeah, and you look at something in that example, right? You would run Gnawed of the Bone because it does everything you want it to do. Your yard's already going to be full of creatures.
Yep.
It has flashback. The flashback cost is exactly the same as the casting cost, which is great.
Yep.
And it keeps you from losing to burn before you can get your graveyard set up,
Right.
which happens.
Yeah.
You know, and even, you know, burn other aggro decks. You know, there's certainly a number of things, even something like Scapeshift, you know, if their combo is they can do 18 damage or even 36 damage, well, chances are Knot of the Bone, Flashback, Knot of the Bone, it might get you above the point where they can actually kill you with the combo. So
yeah,
they need to then go plan B.
They need to wait until they can hit the double Valakut with the 6 mountains, and then you end up getting the whole, more triggers.
Yeah.
I think then you hit like 36 or something. It's been a while since I've done Scapeshift math.
Yeah.
But
even so, right?
They need 8 lands to do that now, so you push them back a whole extra turn, which you're in a more aggressive deck. You capitalize on that and hopefully win the game.
Right. Because they're, right, what are they throwing out as blockers? Steve, sometimes Snapcaster Mage in some number. Sure.
I don't know if they bring in stuff like Thragtusk in that matchup or Thrun in that matchup. They might.
Yeah, but even, right, like Thrun versus 4 Vengevines,
right,
is it's not great.
Or Abzan and Baloth is the other one. Yeah.
Okay, sure. You know, but that's something where straight life gain used to not be good enough. Like I don't think, if you asked us 8 months ago, I think that we would have said straight life gain is not good enough. And
well, this is different. Straight life gain is never good enough main deck unless you're playing a weird combo or strategy that completely revolves around life gain.
Sure.
In the sideboard, it's always fine. Like Feed the Clan was fine, Kitchen Finks was fine. In this deck, you just want Knot of the Bone. And that's kind of the thing. In a lot of these decks where it is okay to play the narrow sideboard cards, it's because they're so narrow, but they fit perfectly into your strategy.
Yeah.
For instance, some decks constantly will have creatures with 4 or more power, so Feed the Clan works really well.
Yep.
Even though Feed the Clan is very narrow and isn't good in most matchups, but if you have trouble against Burn, but you can consistently have 4-powered creatures, Feed the Clan's really good.
Yep. 10 life for 2 mana at instant speed.
Right.
Solid.
And this also kind of harkens back to the whole, when you anticipate your opponent and know what their plan is going to be post-board, you can adjust your plan. The big thing that really I want to drive home here is, if you're, and we kind of touched on this, for instance, you're playing your Eldrazi Taxes list. You're going up against something like Red-Green Tron. It's a little difficult to outgrind Red-Green Tron.
It's probably impossible.
So, instead of outgrinding Red-Green Tron, you can try to be disruptive enough while being more aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
That's an example of an instance where you turn into an aggro deck, in quotes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit more blurry when it's 2 mid-range decks playing against each other. Or, for instance, with the Anafenza Company. Up against Jund or Abzan, that's where I turn into a slightly lower to the ground Abzan mid-range deck and kind of hope for the best. And if you anticipate, because I know what they're going to do is they're going to board into card advantage and removal, and I'm never going to be able to combo off against them.
Right.
So I need a different plan. I go into mid-range, and it's because I know what they're going to do game 2 and 3. And so you need to know, if your opponent's going to make their deck slower, maybe you need to make your deck faster if you can't outgrind them. Or the same the other way. If they're going to just go even more all in and be really fast, you might need more removal spells and take out your top end.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the real second part of knowing what your opponent's going to do, which kind of just comes with format practice.
Yep. That is something we've revisited time and time again. You cannot go into even a small event without a really good grasp on the metagame, because the people that are also there most definitely know, right? You're not going to come into a modern event that has something real at stake and not have people that are, you know, somewhere between experienced and format experts.
Right.
So as soon as sometimes, you know, once you've been playing for long enough, you can look at the first land drop. Like, I can look at the first land drop and tell you probably what the person's playing.
Or at least something close.
You know, you can narrow it down. I mean, there's certain things that are like dead giveaway. Like, if somebody plays Copperline Gorge, I'm like, oh, great, it's Living End.
Or at least, yeah, and in that example, I say it's Living End or Insolent Dredge. Either way, you have to be prepared for lots of graveyard interaction.
Right.
And you can start thinking that in your head, like, maybe I need to, for instance, if I'm playing Jund, let's say, and my opponent goes turn 1 Copperline Gorge, I know I want to try and get my Scavenging Ooze in play with a bunch of green mana and prioritize that over my Tarmogoyf or Dark Confidant. And I'll play that way instead. And that's definitely helpful as well.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, if somebody goes Watery Grave, well, there's a chance they're on that blueback mill deck. And the deck's not good.
I don't know. I like the aggro mill deck. It's fairly well. Okay, I would never play it, but it is actually just like encroaching on very good. The one with
Manic Scribe.
I don't know about Manic Scribe. I'd have to look closer, but no, the one with like 4 Hedron Crab, 4 of the 2 mana artifact whenever a player untaps 4 Mesmeric Orbs.
Mm-hmm.
That version's very good.
I think because I dislike Mill so much, I end up right, there's a direct correlation between the amount that I'm forced to play against it on Magic Online and the amount that I dislike it and the amount of time that I have spent learning how to beat it. So
like the rest of this, a lot of it is up to what people are playing around you. And that's why we tried to also keep it. I mean, we made analogies with our decks and similar decks. But really, it's the concepts behind the strategy. If you can find a really good pilot of the deck you enjoy playing and find that good pilot that wrote a primer or a sideboarding guide, read it and try to understand why they're making those decisions, why they picked the role of the deck they did in a given matchup, and why these cards are what help you. And honestly, like we said, the more reps you get in with a deck, you don't need to learn how to play every modern deck. You just need to learn how to play your deck against everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so
it's only a slightly less daunting task.
Right. At least a little bit. And even sometimes it's like you've played against decks before. If you understand how they're going to operate, you can jump to a couple conclusions about how they'll still operate and what you should do in response. And it works out. It is a steep learning curve, but it's one of the better skills and really like high necessary skills to have to be a really good modern player.
Yeah. Yep. Like I said right in the beginning, 2/3 of your games are going to be post board. So we really, really, really need to practice those games, even to the point of prioritizing those games.
Yeah, sometimes. If you have people that, especially if you have resources of people that play the decks you're worried about, jam sideboard games too.
Yeah.
If you can.
There's, the double-edged sword of the modern card pool being what it is. There's plenty of unbelievable game 1 decks.
Yep.
That can't win a game 2, couldn't buy a game 2 against somebody that knew how to sideboard and play against it.
Right.
So just don't be that person. Let somebody else take that match loss.
Yep. So I think that's mostly it from us. Probably going to round it down with some tips and suggestions from Twitter.
Yep.
Which we sent the TurnOneThoughtseize bat signal up for. Eric on Twitter said, if I am boarding into hate, I like to have 3 or more-ish cards instead of random one-ofs. And that's definitely, we touched on it a little bit. It depends on what archetype you're playing. Yeah. Especially if you're more linear and ready to go. Like and this is more like if you're boarding into specific hate.
Well, that's, the way that I interpret this is if you're boarding into hosers.
Yeah.
Then, you know, run 3.
If Stony Silence does turn out to be like your card that's best and makes the most sense for your deck, don't just throw one of them in. Yep. Throw in the 3 and race them.
Yep.
So, yep.
At the foil, Johnny said, I tend to run the most general answers possible. If I have a card that hurts 3 to 4 decks, I run it over a specific hate card. That is a very fine philosophy for sideboarding, especially in potentially unknown metagames.
Yeah.
You know, a GP or something like that. Any kind of, 300-400 person tournament.
Mm-hmm.
You can make your best guess at what the metagame will be, but you really have to treat it as being basically unknown.
Yeah. And that's why I liked, this is especially true for the more controlling mid-range decks, the Jund list from a couple GPs ago that had 15 one-ofs in the board. Yep. And that was actually the deck that finally pushed me into playing Jund Charm in my list. If you looked at it, it still had 3 to 4 wrath effects, 3 to 4 graveyard interaction effects, like all of these different things, because every single card was pulling triple or quadruple duty.
Yep.
And if you are in a position to take, if you're going to see a lot of your deck, if you're going to have a lot of draw steps, that's the way it should be. And I liked these two, kind of the last 2 listener tips back to back, because they just show the 2 kind of main strategies of Modern, and you kind of like it's the 2 different camps, so to speak. Some decks are going to profit more from one than the other.
At the Hawk Report, or at the _Hawk Report, I like to have 4 of against the predicted meta. I think that's the same thing, right? Like if you happen to know, like if you're going to F&M and you're like, it's going to be 3 scape shifts and a storm. Well, your sideboard can be pretty streamlined against those decks.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And hey, you know what? Just rock that store credit.
Right.
At Northern the Wary said narrow, powerful cards versus broad ones. So this is my suspicion is that this person is a combo player, because that's what that deck needs, right? Is cards that keep you from losing the game before you can combo off, versus...
I think this was more of a topic we should talk about, which we did, and we hope we answered that question.
Huzzah.
That's how I kind of interpreted it.
Jeff Hoogland and at I'm Not Potter both said the same thing, which is take out the bad cards and put in the good ones.
Rock solid advice.
Why
did we record this podcast? We could have just said that, slam the laptop shut, post it. This could have been done hours ago.
But their sentiment, is well taken, right? Obviously they're being cheeky, but the reality is there are going to be cards in your deck that are just straight up bad.
Yeah, and you need to recognize they're bad. I'll go back to it again. In Anafenza Company, there are a lot of matchups where you just side out a ton of mana dorks.
Yep.
Because even though it puts you so far ahead of your opponent, it could be a liability, or you don't need to be a mana ahead of your opponent. Your deck is still faster.
Well, if your first birds is just going to get bolted and your second birds is going to get searing blazed, and your third birds is going to get searing blazed,
right,
they're going to become a liability pretty fast.
Yeah, and so you have that. Instead, you take those out, and that's where I bring in the Tidehollow Scholars and the Core Surf Griffix.
Yeah.
And you leave in some mana dorks, but you recognize how many you actually need. Just keeping on with the line of cheekiness, at 3 Bean Soup, right as you were about to shuffle, pause, pretend to think really hard about something, and then swap out one or more cards.
Yeah.
Magic is a mental game.
Next level.
You gotta just do that a lot.
Yep. Hey, that's paper magic, man.
Paper magic.
Paper magic.
One of my favorite things.
I have to be able to look into your soul.
I like, especially game 2 and 3 after my opponent knows while I was playing Abzan CoCo. I love just really running home the fact that it's not a 60 card deck, because a lot of people don't really like that.
Yeah.
And that helps me.
Yep.
Yep.
Hey.
It's amazing how many people would actually comment or had watched me shuffle or pile shuffle, right. And it's it was never an even amount or what it should be.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, there's one left. Boop. There we go.
Hey,
did it.
You know what? Do whatever you need to do.
Exactly.
If you can get half a percentage point by playing ugly white-bordered lands, do it. Do it.
Yeah. Or if you gain 17 percentage points because you're playing foreign mismatched Tron pieces, please go home. I have 4 different foreign arts for Urza's mine. Which one would you like to destroy? It's the worst. Everyone harps on that Dryad Arbor that looks like a forest.
Yeah.
I think the Urza lands mismatched in foreign is just worse.
Well, the problem is there's one of them that is a power plant, but it looks like a tower.
Yes. Well, there's a couple that don't look like what the word is.
Yeah.
So that's really what kind of hurts it.
Oh, what, you mean Lightning Bug doesn't say power plant to you?
Oh. It's whatever.
It's still the best art, though. Lightning Bug.
And lastly, approximately a lot of you said to sideboard with what your opponent will bring in mind, which was actually one of our 4 major pillars of this episode. So
yep, we
did not list out every single person that suggested this. It was second only to the actual suggestion of talking about sideboards, probably.
Yeah.
And it seems like most people kind of just have a rap on that. It's just kind of a good habit to have. It just takes a lot of practice.
Yeah. So, once again, know your role. Don't dilute your deck. Don't play narrow cards if you don't have to.
Or play narrow cards if you're linear, and that's what you should do.
Sure. And anticipate what your opponent is going to bring in against you.
Yep.
So keep these lessons in mind, and hopefully you will make better sideboard decisions, both before you actually play and while you are playing.
Yep.
So before we get to the spice rack for this week,
which may include a really cool sideboard card,
which does in fact include a really cool sideboard card. If you would like to get a hold of us, you can go to facebook.com/TurnOneThoughtseize. You can go to twitter.com/T1Thoughtseize or at T1Thoughtseize. You can go to our YouTube page, youtube.com/TurnOneThoughtseize, all spelled out. You can see all of our content on our brand spanking new website, TurnOneThoughtseize.com, all spelled out. And if you're listening to us on iTunes, please rate and review us. It really helps us quite a bit. Also, tell a friend.
Yeah.
Go to your F&M, your modern F&M, and be like, hey, you like podcasts? I got one for you. Blammo.
We're not called Blammo. Don't tell them that.
Don't tell them such Blammo. Oh, we should make another one that's just the same exact thing under a different name.
Blammo.
Call it Blammo on iTunes.
Did it.
Boom. Nailed it. The spice rack for this week is Crypt Incursion.
Woo.
Yes. Amazing common from Gate Crash that it does all the stuff. It is a 3-mana instant for 2 and a black. Exile all creatures in target player's graveyard, and you gain 3 life for each card exiled this way. Why would you want this? Well, if you're milling somebody and you are losing to the creatures that you can't kill, or if you're playing against me and there's just 4 Bloodghast attacking you every turn. It's very important that you deal with them at instant speed.
Yeah. Well, it's so relevant for so many reasons, right? Like, first of all, this is good life gain at a good rate at instant speed in black.
Yes.
Which does not get a lot of life gain that's not some sort of give and take.
Right.
And for this, against the right decks, it's very much just all upside. Yeah. If you're playing against Affinity and you can Wrath the board and follow it up with Crypt Incursion, you've stabilized.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing it. If you can get even more value and you're playing against a Dredge opponent or something that just puts a lot of stuff, or there you go. It's more tech against Living End.
Oh, yeah.
You're just getting... It's graveyard hate and life gain in the same card, so it's a versatile sideboard card that does things you want to do in a color that normally doesn't get it.
Yep.
Seems great to me.
Yep. Also, the art is super sweet, and because it was a common from Gatecrash, which was opened quite a bit because of the Shocklands, you should have no trouble getting hold of these for pennies.
Oh, yeah.
So, if you play black and you don't like losing the Living End...
Yeah. And especially in stuff like Grixis, which is notoriously bad with life gain, here's a pretty good answer.
Right. It's... Yeah. I mean, even... I guess... Well, no. Jund has Scavenging Ooze.
Yeah, Jund, if you have access to green, you're doing all right. If you have access to white, it depends. Like, the problem is with white, and especially white-black, normally your life gain is centered on having a lot of creatures in play.
Right.
So Crypt Incursion is still a good one-of in that instance, once it goes wrong. But even in your deck, if you're up against an aggro deck, like, you just have mono-black life gain now, and that's fine.
Yep.
It's not tough on the mana, it's instant speed, and it exiles things for your processing.
Yep. I'm gonna get a little grip of these. I usually just buy 4, for stuff like this. Like, am I ever gonna use 4? No, probably not. Do I want to have to dig around for them? Like, it allows me to lose 2 of them and still have enough that I can use them when I want them.
Oh my god.
Come on. So that is our Spice Rack for the week. If you have any suggestions for Spice Rack cards, you can certainly hit us up on Twitter at @T_1Thoughtseize, or shoot us an email, thoughtseizeu@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.